Okay, we are live.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Flood Insurance Outreach Program hosted by the City of Las Cruces and the Risk Reduction Plus Group. My name is Jacob Kidd. I am the Environmental Compliance Officer with the City of Las Cruces Community Development Department. And today we have Brian Christopherson and Tyler Ardren with the Risk Reduction Plus Group. So some of the topics that we'll be discussing today, I'll be going over a brief overview of the community rating system, and then I will go ahead and hand it over to Tyler and Brian, and they will be covering some of the new laws and regulations set forth by the NFIP that are going to be affecting flood policies across the country. They'll also be covering some mitigation steps for policyholders to decrease flood risks. I believe also they'll be covering some of their success stories that they've encountered along the way. And then we'll go ahead and conclude with a question and answer session. I have two comments before we get started. First of all, for questions, if you would please type them into the chat box and we will answer those questions at the end of the presentations. Also, this program is being recorded and you can go back and watch the training video via the City of Las Cruces YouTube channel. So with that, I will go ahead and get started on the National Flood Insurance Program Community Rating System. So the NFIP created the CRS program to encourage communities to exceed the minimum program requirements for floodplain management. It is a voluntary program for any communities in the US and it is incentive-based. So the more communities engage with activities that are outlined in the CRS program, the better the incentives communities receive for their residents. So for the City of Las Cruces, the flood program was previously administered through our Public Works Department, but as of January 1st of 2020, Community Development has taken the flood program over. Public Works still serves in a advisory capacity and also helps us with technical support for engineered flood studies that we see for development purposes. So under the CRS program, flood insurance premium rates are adjusted to reflect the reduced flood risk as a result from the community activities that meet the CRS program's three main objectives, which are reducing flood damage to insurable properties within their jurisdiction, to strengthen and support the insurance aspects of the NFIP, and to encourage a comprehensive approach to floodplain management. And so here's a table that shows the rating system for the classifications for communities. A class 10 is the entry level into the CRS program. And basically that just meets the bare minimal requirements of the CRS. And then the classes go all the way up to a class 1, which will get you essentially the best premium discounts that the NFIP has to offer. Currently, the City of Las Cruces has a CRS rating of a 7, which equates to being able to get up to 15% premium discounts for policyholders that are in the special flood hazard area, and also 5% discounts for policyholders that are outside of the special flood hazard area. And the class rating is determined on a point accumulation system. And so the point accruals are based off of 4 main classes or categories, which include public information, mapping and regulations, flood damage reduction, and flood preparedness. And so within each one of these series, there are subcategories where a community can get points. So for instance, under the 300 series for public information, communities have the opportunity to engage with public outreach, such as this program that we're having today, a community will get points for, which goes to a better rating for that community. Another example for public information is the requirement for elevation certificates. And the city is expected to require elevation certificates for permitting purposes. And we are required not only to have those to issue permits, but we're also required to ensure the accuracy of those ECs and also to keep copies of those on file for public information purposes. So again, there is subcategories for all four of these series, and each one will give added points for engaging with those activities. So to my knowledge, FEMA is not going to release a 2021 CRS manual. They'll still be utilizing the 2017 CRS manual, which has several addendums added to them, which had taken effect January 1st of this year. The biggest change, in my opinion, for this program is the new Class 8 prerequisite that now requires a 1-foot freeboard above the base flood elevation for residential structures. And this is for both new construction and substantial improvement for existing structures. Previously, the NFIP requirement was structures needed to be at or higher than the BFE, but now they're requiring 1 foot of freeboard. Our current city code is still at the previous requirement. So until we are able to get that amended and approved, we're going to be enforcing this requirement under the 2015 International Residential Code. And this specifically is outlined in chapter 322.2.1. And the reason that I feel that this is an extremely important thing to understand is that if the city does not enforce this new requirement, this is again a prerequisite for a Class 8. So automatically we would be docked down to a Class 9, in which now we would only be able to get discounts at 5% for policyholders in the special flood hazard area. So to me, this is extremely important for us to enforce. We are, and we'll continue to do so. So with that, that's all I have. And I will go ahead and turn things over to Brian and Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yep, you're good now, Brian.
Okay, thank you. All right, so my name is Brian Christopherson. I'm a certified floodplain manager and a licensed insurance agent with Risk Reduction Plus Group and floodproofing.com. And I'm here with Tyler Audron. He's with Risk Reduction Plus as well. I'm going to walk you through this outreach that we provide communities that have flood insurance issues. A little bit about us. We've been helping folks for over 20 plus years that have sustained flooding. All of our staff here at Risk Reduction Plus are CFM, certified floodplain managers. We do outreach, flood insurance outreach in all states, and we have a savings record of 83% on average. So we do save people money on their flood insurance, sometimes through mitigation, sometimes through the LOMA process, which I'll explain here later. And I look forward to doing this with you guys. If you guys have an elevation certificate, you can send it into email specifically set up for your community. It's loscruces@yourfloodrisk.com, and we will provide you with a free review of your elevation certificate to show you how you can save money on your flood insurance. So as we all know, flooding is the #1 natural disaster in the United States. All 50 states have experienced floods in the past, especially in the past 5 years, where flooding is becoming more prevalent. 70% of the Hurricane Harvey losses were outside of special flood hazard areas. So The saying I like to use is, if it can rain, it can flood, and that's fairly true no matter where you're at. 20% of NFIP claims are in mid to low risk areas. Again, inside that special flood hazard area. So we want to make sure that everybody's covered. This is a sad fact. 94% of Americans do not have flood insurance. And so if they do experience flood damage, that's coming out of pocket. So some definitions for y'all. We have base flood elevation. That's the BFE. That's the predicted height that flood wire is anticipated to rise during storms or flooding. It's the 1% chance of flood, otherwise known as a 100-year storm. We have community rating system, as Jacob just alluded to, CRS. It rewards communities that reduce their flood risk. We also have freeboard, and freeboard is elevating the building's lowest floor above and beyond the base flood elevation. And that provides for a lower flood insurance premium because you're protecting your structure from that damage that it would normally receive. As Jake mentioned, we do have there will be a one foot freeboard requirement for post-firm structures in the flood zones and substantially improved homes in Las Cruces. Some different flood zones. We have A zones. Those have established BFEs, AE zones, and A1 through 30 zones. Those have established base flood elevations and low impact from waves. And then you have the V zones, which we don't really concern ourselves with. Those are velocity areas, and they have high impact from waves. So why all the reforms for the NFIP? So basically what we could say is that it's paying out more than it's taken in. The amount paid out that FEMA's paid out to the NFIP, say in 2017, you're talking over $10 billion, right? And they only brought in 3.3 billion. So they're losing money hand over fist. And so they need to kind of adjust their rates to more actuarial rates. And so they're actually starting to rating according to your risk. So this is why mitigation is important. And this is why knowing what your risk actually is also important. And that's why the elevation certificate is so key in this. Some policy changes that we've seen. 2012, Biggert Waters Reform Act was passed. Biggert Waters says basically in a nutshell that we need to make sure people that are paying flood insurance or in these high risk flood areas are paying their actuarial or their fair share. And so there was a really high percentage increase in flood insurance policies. Some were unaffordable. So Graham Waters, or the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act, came out in 2014, which kind of reduced the rate of incline of your flood insurance premiums, and it's kind of slowed the rate hike. But it's still we're starting to see a lot of high flood insurance policies now. Policy changes: 18 to 25% for anybody who did not have an elevation certificate, a 9% increase for everyone else. And April 1st, 2015, there's a $25 surcharge for primary residents, and it's a $250 for non-primary. So if you have that secondary home in a flood zone, you'll be charged a surcharge of $250. Okay, so subsidized rates are going away. There's still grandfathering, however. Business properties and severe repetitive loss companies, which severe repetitive loss, kind of touch on that. This hurts your CRS rating. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of these severe repetitive loss buildings or structures. That way you can continue to grow in the CRS and save money on that flood insurance. Continue to grow that discount. April 1st, 2020, NFIP premium increases. The primary pre-firm, it's a 7.5% increase on your flood insurance. Non-primary, severe repetitive loss structures, substantially improved, and non-residential structures, 23 to 25%. Okay, that's a substantial increase in flood insurance premium. Post-firm rated with elevation certificate, 5%. So you can see how the elevation certificate is going to help, and being built to the current code is going to help as well. So there's ways to lower your flood insurance, and obviously, that 1 foot of freeboard is going to help Las Cruces with post-firm properties. Elevation certificates, where do you get one? always get one from a local uh, professional land surveyor, one that's familiar with the terrain, and one that does elevation certificates. I don't have any recommendations right now, but it's always good to get one from a local source. Repetitive loss and severe repetitive loss. A repetitive loss property has two or more claims of more than $1,000 over a 10-year period. Where that severe repetitive loss or SRL property, there's four or more claims of more than $5,000 or two or more claims where the total exceeds the current value of the property. Okay. Those need to be substantially improved. So there's some type of mitigation that needs to be done to them, whether it be elevation, flood openings, whatever the case may be. And that's what we help out with, right, with our flood risk evaluator. We've actually reviewed almost 6,000 cases lifetime, and we've saved a total premium reduction potential of $11 million. Okay, 39.2% of our cases pay lower premiums by correcting paperwork or mitigation. Sometimes during our elevation certificate review, we find an error that could be corrected very easily. Okay, and 39% of the cases that we've seen are actually a flood declaration page error or an elevation certificate error that are easily corrected. Okay, so it's not just always this is what it is. Through the evaluation service, we find if there's any errors on that EC or the flood deck page, we'll find them and we'll help correct them. Again, top policy errors. Incorrect residency status, whether it be a primary or not or non-primary. It could be a pre-firm structure. Pre-firm is pre-flood insurance rate map. Structure is not rated properly. Undocumented flood vents. And this is a big one that we see everywhere. They're not properly documenting the flood openings for the building. Incorrect building diagram number. Again, that's another big one, especially with elevated structures. And they're unaware of eligibility for LOMA, letter of map amendment. And what this does, it actually takes you out of that flood zone. It amends the flood map to not include your property, which is good for you because it opens you up to lower flood insurance rates. And that's big because, you go from paying thousands of dollars to maybe a few $100, right? So it's definitely worth it to find out if you're eligible for a LOMA. Again, we've done 5,000 plus insurance reviews and a total premium reduction of $10.6 million. So we do this a lot. This is what we do. And, report benefits. This is what the report would generally look like. But what we're doing now is we're letting you know where you sit in the flood zone, right? We look for policy mistakes. We look for what type of flood zone you're in and the requirement that your community has for building or substantially improving in a flood zone. You also get a free flood insurance quote from us, okay? Whether it be private or whether it be NFIP, we can help on both ends. And we also do manufacture products that can help lower your premium as well. So there's always different ways to look at. Some different types of solutions. Number one, you can mitigate to compliance, and that could be elevating your home. It could be adding flood openings to your home. It could be as simple as adding, a couple inches of fill around your foundation. We'll let you know what you got to do. We want to make sure that you're correctly rated, so you're paying what you should be paying for your flood insurance. And then number three, if it doesn't work with the NFIP because it's too expensive, we could look at the private flood insurance market to see if maybe that could be tailored to your liking. Reducing flood risks and mitigation steps. We look at flood openings. So what we have here is two different buildings, and we're probably very familiar out in New Mexico with these type of structures, where they're slab on grade or maybe elevated a little bit on a crawl space or full height enclosure. The reason why we look to eliminating that hydrostatic pressure and buoyancy force is to eliminate the chance of that foundation, failing during a flood. So how it can fail during a flood is when the flood water rises up on the structure, it causes lateral force, or pushing the water starts to push against the foundation. And it can also cause buoyancy force issues when the water table rises during the flood, and could actually cause the house to float. Okay. By putting in uh, flood openings that would allow water and debris to flow through the structure, you're eliminating that pressure, you're eliminating the buoyancy force, and you're eliminating any chance that your home's going to float away. Okay. So therefore, you've lowered your risk of damage during that flood, and you're going to save substantially on your flood insurance. These are subgrade structures, not where flood insurance is going to cost a substantial amount of money. They're subgrade, okay, so they have to deal with increased buoyancy force from the water table, right? They have to deal with the hydrostatic pressure on a larger structure, and then they have to deal with the saturated soil pressures, right? That would push against this foundation and cause it to fail over time. So we need to make sure that any substantially improved or maybe post firm, they're building them at grade or at the leg and on up. Okay, so um, in a substantially improved case, you would fill this basement in to the lowest adjacent grade, and then put in some flow through flood openings, and you're good to go. Obviously, mechanicals, if any, in that lower space have to be elevated as well. So this is what it would look like if you did not have proper flood openings, right? You would still have lateral force pushed against your structure, and even after the flood, you may still these tend to plug. Okay, like a non-engineered opening would plug because it has a screen on it, and so that's what we're trying to prevent. The screen would plug, you'd have lateral force pushed against your structure. This may cause failure of the foundation. You would have a higher risk of flood damage, receiving flood damage. So therefore, your flood insurance premium is going to reflect that. By putting in proper flood openings, you equalize that pressure on both sides, and you eliminate that risk, right? You substantially lower the risk or eliminate the risk by equalizing the pressure, and there's nothing pushing against your foundation wall, so there's no chance it could fail. Okay, so that's going to lower your risk of receiving damage during a flood, and it's going to help you with savings. You're going to see a lot of savings. This is the reason why, because you don't see damage like this with proper flood openings installed on the home. An automatic opening that protects your foundation by allowing bidirectional water flow, which equalizes hydrostatic pressure. This is an ICCES certified manufactured opening. Okay, there's engineered specific project openings that have to be signed off by an engineer, and there's ICCES certified engineered products that have a certification with them. Okay, those all need to be attached to your elevation certificate, so your insurance agent knows that you have engineered openings, and the NFIP knows you have engineered openings. The vent placement requirement, the FEMA minimum standard would be the vent has to be installed on at least 2 exterior walls, no more than 12 inches from the highest adjacent grade, and it has to be installed below the base flood elevation. So those are important guidelines to remember. 2 exterior walls, no more than 12 inches from the highest adjacent grade, and it has to be installed below BFE or base flood elevation. And this is a home in my neck of the woods here. There's a story on YouTube. It's called Meet the Wagners, and this is a very cool story because the homeowner was going to be paying a fortune for floods. In fact, they've been paying almost $9,000 a year for flood insurance. So how we look at the elevation certificate as an insurance agent to see how we're rating this property is we look at the base flood elevation. The elevation certificate has the base flood elevation at 460 feet. The NFIP is going to rate this home at the top of the bottom floor because there's no flood openings. Okay, so they're going to rate the top of the bottom slab at 450.93, making this a -9 structure not subgrade, but it's a -9. It's below the BFE by 9 feet. So you're talking $9,000 plus in annual premium. They were, excuse me, they were fortunate enough to be receiving a subsidized rate due to an error at $2,038 a year. The homeowner did his homework and found out that by installing flood openings on his property or on his structure, he's allowed that water and debris to flow through the structure, equalize the pressure in the foundation during a flood, and he creates flood storage for the water as well. So the NFIP rates them now at the top of the next higher floor. Okay, that's also on the elevation certificate. And so the top of the next higher floor happens to be his living space. So it's 460.69, round that up to a +1, right? So he has 1 foot of freeboard. And they installed ICC ES certified engineered flood vents. And now they only pay $511 a year for flood insurance. So go from a subsidized rate that they were given by mistake of $2,038 to an actual rating of a +1 and a $511 a year premium. So that's year after year savings on their flood insurance that they see and they keep. The stats on the home, it was built in 1952. The zone was AE. The base elevation was 9 feet. And it's a primary residence building diagram of -8. This is almost a $3,000 NFIP premium. And after the mitigation, this is another save percent of their flood insurance. And this is average. I've seen people save 95%, and through a LOMA, obviously, you could save even higher. But we always recommend, even with a LOMA, is getting that low flood insurance premium because you never know. In 2019, we had the worst flooding here in the Midwest that we've seen in since '93 probably, and it was record flooding in a lot of places. And probably, I'd say the number was probably 80%. Even homes that had LOMAs, they flooded. And so what a lot of people were doing was they'd receive the LOMA and they would cancel their flood insurance. And these folks, there was probably over 100 folks in one meeting that I went into, 100 folks that had LOMAs, and they all flooded. Okay, so that pain they have to relive because it's coming out of their pocket. So money they could have used for home improvements or a new car possibly is now going to redo their home and bring it up to current standards. So flood insurance will bail you out, and we recommend even if you're in the next zone, pay that low premium. It's you might not think it's worth it, but if you ever have a flood, you'll definitely want it. And so we can go back to the old adage: it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So we would look at private insurance versus NFIP. Private flood insurance, obviously, will cover a whole lot more. But the NFIP, you'll need an elevation certificate so we can determine your risk. And then obviously, it does cover decks as long as they're attached to the property or to the structure. Questions or misconceptions about private flood insurance? Will my mortgage company accept it? Yes, it will, providing that it's not a first-time home buyer loan or FHA loan or a veterans loan, VA loan. But for the most part, we've had no problems with having a lender accept private flood insurance. Can they pay my claim? Yes, and they actually will cover a lot more, but they can pay your claim, and it's not affordable. Sometimes I would say you would have a 50% instant savings over NFIP, but again, it's something that we need to really look at if it's right for you. We would give you all the information that you're going to need to make that educated decision. So lowering flood insurance steps residents can take to save money. One, you send your documents in for review. Again, use that last Cruces at yourfloodrisk.com. that's specialized to the city of Las Cruces. You'll receive a free flood insurance report, and we'll let you know what you have to do, if anything, to mitigate your property to bring it into compliance and save that money. Again, review the policy, see how much you can save. The documents you're going to need, you'll need an elevation certificate and your current flood insurance policy. And again, send to Las Cruces at yourfloodrisk.com, or you can give us a call at 866-599-7066. I'll go back to that slide if you don't mind. Okay, I'm done. Tyler, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on a little bit. So risk rating 2.0 is a new risk modeling tool that the NFIP has proposed. They're supposed to come out in November and then release the rates actually in the next couple months here in April. I haven't seen the rates yet. They haven't released them, but when they do, we'll be able to give more information. But currently, the NFIP does their rating based off a elevation difference from your lowest rated floor compared to the base flood elevation level that Brian was talking about. And the way risk rating 2.0 is proposed to work is more similar to private flood insurance, where they're taking more factors other than just the elevation difference. They're looking at historical data, distance to flooding, and also LIDAR, which basically they have an idea where your ground elevation is and determine a rate based off of that. So that's proposed to come out in November. So there could be some great changes with the NFIP coming up in the not too far future. And like I said, that the rates haven't been released yet, so I don't have any particular details on what it's going to look like. But if you want to stay in touch with us, that's something that we're on top of, and we'll be sure to educate everybody that is asking about that. So hopefully it comes out in November. It was supposed to come out last November, but they pushed it to this year. So we'll see how that goes. To touch on private flood insurance, kind of what I was saying about the risk rating 2.0. The reason why private flood insurance doesn't require an elevation certificate is because they are using all those different things that I just spoke about, like LIDAR, historical data, distance to flooding, and then they're basing the rate off of that information that they have. Like Brian said, it's not the best option for everybody. There's negatives and positives with it. Negatives being that if you do have a claim, they'll most likely drop you at renewal. And in that case, you would have to go back to the National Flood Insurance Program, and you're no longer eligible for subsidized rates. Brian was touching a little bit on subsidized rates. What a subsidized rate is when you're not being rated off your elevation certificate. So you don't have an elevation certificate, and you're just receiving what they call a subsidized rate. So if you were to go back to the NFIP after leaving private, you would need an elevation certificate no matter what, and your rate would be based off that elevation difference. Another negative with private flood insurance, you're not eligible for federal grants. So if you do have a claim, your claim will be paid out. We went through many claims with Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Harvey, Superstorm Sandy that were paid out. But those homeowners were not eligible for grants, say to lift their house or to come up into compliance like someone with the NFIP would be eligible for. So that is something to take note as well. But the positive is if you do have a bad elevation difference and the NFIP is expensive and there's not much mitigation that can be done to your home, and we can get private for 50% cheaper than what you're currently paying, that could be, the positive and why you would want to make that switch. So that's something that we could look into. Like Brian's showing here, If you do have an elevation certificate, we would be happy to review it and recommend mitigation steps that you could take. And then we give a flood insurance quote to show what the return on investment is, so that you can make an educated decision on whether or not you want to mitigate your home. But not only are you going to reduce your flood insurance costs, but you're going to protect your building. God forbid if it does flood. Now you're protected and your home will be standing after the flood event. That's pretty much all I have, Brian. Was there anything else that you wanted me to cover?
I think that's it.
Awesome. So if you can, we do have the rest of the time for questions. Just to give you a little background, like Brian said, we do these outreaches nationwide. And I've been doing this now for these outreaches for 6 years. And I used to do a much longer presentation. Typically my presentations are an hour, but I cut this down to 30 minutes, as you can see here. And the reason why is because so many people had questions unique to their building, and every building is unique. And so if you do have questions, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. Please utilize that. And we'll use the rest of this time to answer any questions specific to your flood insurance policy or your home. And, the goal of this program is to get any questions that you have out on the table and get them answered. I've talked to many homeowners who've said they've had questions for years and they've never been able to get them answered. And, our goal is just to help you answer these questions so that you can make an educated decision on what you want to do with your greatest investment, being your home.
And I would add one more thing too, and it goes back to the elevation certificate. They're very important, and the NFIP has no way of knowing what your actual risk is unless they have that data in front of them, right? So we need to know where the top of the bottom floor is in relation to the base flood elevation, and then we need to know that next higher floor is, right? So that tells us too how we can help you mitigate your home. So elevation certificate is key. An elevation certificate could also slow down your rate of rise of flood insurance. There's all kinds of things the EC does for you. It can let you know if you're LOMA eligible as well, and that's something that we would let you know too in reviewing the elevation certificate. So definitely, the first step for NFIP insurance is to make sure that you have that elevation certificate.
Yeah, it looks like I'm looking at the question box. So I'll just rattle off some of the questions here. So the first question we have is, what are the maintenance requirements on the ICC flood vents? So to answer that question, really there's not any maintenance required. They're 316 marine grade stainless steel. So they're made to not rust in water environments. You can take the door off the frame and wash it down with a hose just so that you get all the debris out that might come with a flood, or even just, being outside could accrue some debris. So you can always wash it off with a hose, but there's not really any maintenance requirements per se. Next question. Hi, I'm starting to build a new home in a flood zone and would like to know how much flood insurance is going to be. I plan on building my bottom floor 1 foot above the BFE. So to answer your question directly, we review plans for homeowners all the time. And we recommend what they need to do to get the lowest flood insurance possible. For your case specifically, as long as everything's unfinished below the BFE, you have proper openings and the living floor is 1 foot above the BFE, on a primary residence, you could expect to pay anywhere from depending on coverage, if you're going full coverage, anywhere from $700 to about $900 a year. That's depending on the coverage limits that you would want. But I would say, please utilize that email address that Brian has up on the screen here and send in your information because we do want to make sure that it's being built properly. I'm sure the city is on top of that, or the town is on top of that as well. But we want to make sure it's being built properly so that you do receive that flood insurance premium that I'm talking about here. Because I've seen before new construction homes where they think it's 1 foot above BFE and everything, but now they have a bonus room down in the lowest area. And now that person's being rated a lot lower than what they thought they were, and paying thousands of dollars more than they thought they were. So if you can, send in your information to that email address, and we'll make sure that the home is built properly, in compliance and everything, and you do receive the best possible flood insurance rate.
And to add to that, Tyler, I would add too that you actually get an even bigger discount the higher you go, up to a +3.
Yeah. Yep. So the more freeboard that you utilize, and the higher your elevation differences to the BFE, the cheaper your flood insurance is going to be. So whenever I talk to homeowners, I always see first if there's a height requirement on the roof line with the town. Generally there is. So that's something that we would want to look into. But if it's really not that much more expensive on a new construction house to add another course of block or whatever, depending on what it is, concrete, whatever your slab is, or your foundation. And it's future proof. I like to call it future proofing your home. So that, if the maps change in the future, as we know, water and storms is just getting worse and worse every year. So if you are building a house, sometimes it's smart to, like Brian's saying, build it 2 to 3 feet above the base flood elevation level. How do I get an elevation certificate? So Brian spoke to that a little earlier, but a local licensed surveyor would be able to assist with that. We don't have any recommendations per se. The town may have some surveyors that they know of that can help with this, but a licensed surveyor would be able to complete the elevation certificate for you. It's great, Jeremy, on having an EC done. Once you have that done, utilize that email address. And then, like I said, I'll take a look at it. Just make sure that you get that lowest possible premium. My house structure is located on my property just outside the FEMA flood zone. The front yard is partially within the flood zone. I do not currently have flood insurance. So if you do have a federally backed mortgage, to be required to have flood insurance and to be considered technically in the flood zone, it would have to touch the actual structure. So that's the reason why you probably don't have flood insurance. But like we spoke about in the beginning, 20% of the NFIP claims are through low risk zones. But I would challenge that stat. And the reason why is most people in X zones don't have flood insurance policies. So in my mind, that number should be a lot larger if more people in X zones did have flood insurance policies. You can get a low preferred risk policy for under $400 a year, depending on the coverage. You can get $80,000 in building coverage if you want it for about $200 a year. And to answer your follow-up question, what can I do to mitigate flood risk and get insurance at a reasonable rate? If you are in an X zone where, like you're saying here, where the flood zone doesn't touch your structure, then there is no mitigation that you can do to the home to lower the flood insurance, because you're already eligible for what they call a preferred risk policy. And preferred risk policies rates are lower than any rate that you could ever get. So if you are in an X zone, you're eligible to get like I said, a flood policy for under $400 a year, depending on how much coverage you were looking to obtain. Las Cruces misspelled in the website. Oh, we apologize for that. Let me make sure that it may just be the PowerPoint. So I would think that is probably right. Let me make sure, because we've had some people already utilize this email address. I just want to make, okay. So the email address on the slide, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. The email address on the slide has an S in there. It should be a C, as Las Cruces is actually spelled. Don't send it to that email address because I won't get it. Um,
That was my fault. I apologize.
no worries. Yeah, make sure you send it to your actual town name. Because if you send it to this email address, it won't come to me, or to us. So thank you so much for bringing that to my attention, because I didn't even notice that, to be honest. But it looks like that's all the questions. We're still here to answer any more questions. We're here for the full hour. So if you do have any more questions, just shoot them away. We're here to help.
There we go. How's that look?
Perfect. Use that email address.
Okay, so I think we'll probably give the participants a little bit more time for any questions. If not, you can always shoot an email to me at jkid@lost-cruces.com. So we'll give a little bit more time for any other questions, and then we will conclude the meeting.
Yeah, also, while we're just waiting for some more questions, I wanted to thank Adrian and Jacob for bringing this to your community. The CRS program that Jacob went over takes a lot of work that you may not see on the homeowner front. It's all done in their office, but it does take a lot of work to make sure that everybody's receiving a discount on their flood insurance. So I just wanted to acknowledge them. And again, thank them for allowing us to do this.
Absolutely, and thank you guys for your presentations as well. It looks like we have one more question that just came in. Can we contact someone at the city to get a recommendation on a local surveyor to get an EC? So unfortunately, we are unable to give recommendations for professionals. Your best bet is going to be to try and just Google search surveyors in the Las Cruces area. Okay, and with that, I don't see any further questions, so we will go ahead and conclude this webinar. Thank you all for participating and attending this meeting, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.